Done an introduction, kind of look back at history to see exactly what's happened in the past that were revolutionary, from the typewriter to the human computers, and then we talked about virtualization. And so now what we want to talk about is how to actually get started with AI. What are some things that you need to take into account before you jump in, before you start looking at tools and things like that? I gave this presentation to a Chamber of Commerce. It went really well, so I'm just going to present the same thing here, and hopefully you will also get some good out of this presentation. So, why are we talking about AI right now? Well, for one, AI adoption is accelerating very quickly, and not only is the adoption accelerating, but the tools behind the adoption are also maturing very rapidly. Many of you are probably getting pressure, not just from your employees and vendors and peers, but also from leaders, your board members, your CEO. There's a lot of AI first companies out there, and most leaders still feel behind. They don't know where to get started, and they're not really sure what it means to be AI first. So, what we're going to do here is I'm going to give you my perspectives from many years in the IT industry. So, moving to the next slide, I've been in IT for over 30 years. One of the early examples was when I was still a high schooler, actually. I started to work for an engineering company that was adjacent to my high school as part of a work program. And as the 1990s rolled in, it was a requirement for government contracts that you would have to provide CAD drawings, not just your hand-drawn plans for the Department of Criminal Justice. And I came in with some computer background, saw that they were hand plotting on graph paper, and I said, you know, guys, we could get you a CAD system, we could get you a large scale plotter, and even though it wouldn't save time on the initial drawing, your future drawings would be, or any revisions to drawings would be much more efficient than what you're doing today. And so, sure enough, we got a drawing that came back and it was completely marked up. They basically rearranged every single thing that we had put on the plan and almost reversed the entire layout. And typically that would have taken me hours and hours, probably a full day, just to erase what was there and then to redraw it the way that we did things back then. And so my boss handed it to me. I walked into my office. I spent maybe 5 minutes, cleaned it up, rearranged everything, and brought it back in a fresh print for him. And he looked at me and he said, why are you bringing this back in? Do you need me to mark something else? I've already marked up the drawing. And I said, no, it's done. I already did the work. And at that moment, the light bulb kind of went on in his head about how efficient you could be with a CAD system. So that was an early example. I was an early VMware advocate, so I had two team members I worked with, and they both wanted to implement VMware. They wanted to embed it in a browser, do some fancy things with it, and then they both quit, and I was left with the project. So I simplified it, delivered it on Linux boxes, used Exceed to get the desktop, started it up, installed VMware tools, and then remote desktoped in to run my VMs. And those are transformational technologies. They made big impacts for the businesses. So then obviously cloud came around, and so I've done quite a bit of work with AWS and done some with Google Cloud and others. But when you look at companies like Uber, Airbnb, Vrbo, those companies could not have scaled at the rate that they did had cloud not been available. They wouldn't have been able to build the data centers fast enough to be able to scale up, to have the capacity to build like they did. And so we look at these foundational technologies and kind of the shifts in the industry, and then we can look forward to what's going to happen with AI. So I just wanted to give you a little perspective, tell you where I'm coming from, tell you the vision that I have, and the reason why I see things that I do. And we'll start by talking about the noise. we want to get rid of it. So what AI is not? Number one, it's not a magic fix. It's not like you can say, I'm going to throw AI into my project and all of a sudden my project's going to fly, where previously we had broken processes and things that didn't work. AI is not going to automatically fix that. It's not autonomous wisdom that will layer on top of your broken processes and fix things for you. AI is also not a business strategy. You can't say, I'm going to run an AI business and not have any idea what that business is going to be. You need a business strategy, and then you can layer AI where it fits into that business strategy. And finally, AI is not intended to remove people from your business. If you go in and you say, that's my goal for my AI project, you will most likely fail, and we will cover the reasons for that in a little while. It may be that you can reduce the number of people that are required to run your business. It may be that some people refuse to move forward with you and they end up being let go from the business. But AI is not it's not a wise strategy to say that removing people from my business is my AI strategy. So be very careful with that one. So what is AI? Well, at the foundational layer, it's pattern recognition. We have trained models, GPTs, right? General pre-trained models they've basically been trained on all of the data that's available across the internet. As models started to tell you where they're getting data, a lot of times you'll see they're going into Wikipedia or other sources to pull data. And so they've been trained on that information that's available. It's pattern recognition. It's a mathematical formula. There's chunking, and then there's overlap, and we can get deeper into those things later. But for right now, you just need to know that it is pattern recognition and the correlation of words in your questions to the correlation of words that are given in your answer. It is also acceleration and amplification. So if you have a bad process that fails, it can fail faster and worse than it did before. So you need to be very careful about what you apply AI on top of. If you take the time to structure your workflows, then you can accelerate those and you can amplify your employees' capabilities and things like that. But it is an accelerator and an amplifier. AI is really good for decision support. So if you have a number of scenarios, you can run those through artificial intelligence. You can use it as a thinking partner. You can give it a context so that it can take a specific view of a problem, and then you can go back and forth with that, trying to come up with a better decision than you would be able to do on your own. And finally, it's a workforce enablement tool. So an example would be an insurance agency that has somebody who's been in the agency for 25 years, and they've learned the policies. They've seen as the changes came around. You could actually build an agent that would be able to surface that level of detail to your more junior resources almost in real time. And so you can use it to enable your workforce, bring those skills or that information to the right person at the right time. So the real risk with AI isn't that AI itself is too advanced. It usually fails because businesses aren't ready for AI. And we will start to walk through the risks around AI. So risk number one is the wrong question kickoff. And quite often you're going to hear, what AI tools should we use? Or we have this AI tool, let's use this for something. And if you start off just asking which tool should we use or that type of question, you're already on the wrong path. So you need to focus on the outcome that you want to achieve, not the tool set that you have. And this is going to be really important in the future because tool sets are rapidly evolving, and the right tool could potentially change while you're in the implementation phase or even in the design phase of your project. So focus on the outcome, not the tool set. Risk number two is automating the wrong things. So if you layer AI onto broken processes, It's not going to fix the processes. You need to take the time to understand what your processes are and what the components of those are and where the human needs to stay in the loop. Um, if you don't have clarity on what should remain human, meaning that there are risks to reputation, or there are things that are audit concerns, you may not want to let your AI agents or your AI program create a breach. And so you may want to put some checkpoints in there where things should remain human. And one example of that would be if you are going to generate auto responses to a marketing funnel, until you trust that and until you've tested it well, you may want it to go through the entire process, but instead of responding via email, you might want to have it just save a draft and then have a human go in, read the draft, review the workflow, make sure that everything looks right, remove any of those funny characters that AI likes to put in, and then send it off from there after they've revised it. And just remember, speed without direction is just chaos. So even though you can move very quickly with AI, if you have not defined the inputs and the outputs and understood the workflow, you can end up with a very chaotic situation and quite often no explainability on how AI came to a conclusion that it did. So, risk number 3 is data exposure and control. So we definitely need to have compliance in place. We need to understand what the inputs and the outputs are. We need to understand who has ownership of those. You need to set clear boundaries on what AI can be used for within your company, and you need to make sure that you have policies in place and that you have ownership of those. You have someone accountable for those. And then another common problem we see is shadow AI used by employees. So as employees start to use AI outside of the workforce, they will typically want to use it within the workforce because it is a powerful enabler. It enables them to get more done more quickly and, quite honestly, a lot of times more accurately. So you want to make sure that you have an AI policy and that it's enforceable. And especially be careful about cell phones and employee devices that come into the workforce. Make sure that they're very aware of the consequences of potential data breaches and leaks and things like that. There are cases where an employee can use their own personal tools and they can get some of the benefit, but you need to be very explicit about where that is and is not allowed. And this is not about fear mongering, it is about making sure that you own the responsibility. Risk number 4 is the human side that nobody plans for. So quite often our managers are unsure of how to guide the usage of the employees. Employees get anxious if you start talking about AI at the management layer and you have not set the groundwork for how the employees are going to remain relevant within the AI project or after the AI project. And so it's really good to take the time to explain to the employees what the problem is that you're trying to solve and how AI plays into that without creating that adversarial tone that we want to get rid of employees and we want to use AI in place of our employees. Make sure that employees don't have that fear of replacement, because if they do, they're quite likely to sabotage your AI projects. And that could be a number of sources. I just recently heard of a case where some physical AI was put into place. They were using cameras to watch for certain security controls, or I would say safety controls in this case, and employees started to cut the cables. They didn't want to be watched. They didn't want this AI investigating them, and there was just a distrust. And so if the managers of that particular project would have explained in detail to the employees what the reasoning was, how it meets the business objectives by putting these controls in place and putting this AI program together, then they could have likely avoided a lot of the sabotage. And then the final one is employees experimenting quietly. So again, if the tools are available and they're reachable from the laptops or from within the company, employees are naturally going to experiment with the tools that are available to them. And so you need to make sure that the employees understand the risks and the consequences, and really explain to them the business drivers behind the decisions, and not just leave it as you're not allowed to use these. Employees do want to understand what are the parameters and why they're in place, just like you or I would want. And just remember, management sets the tone of AI as either supportive or adversarial. And if you create that adversarial tone, there's going to be a lot of backlash, and you're going to have a lot of problems with your AI programs. So risk number 5 is allowing pressure to lead you back to that tools focus. If you get focus or a lot of pressure from your CEO or from your board, and it says, hey, you have to implement AI projects. AI projects are the focus of the year. We are going to be AI first. The natural thing would be to look at, well, okay, I don't know where to start, so I'm going to go start looking at some tools. And what does this tool do? And then how can I apply that tool into this particular work stream to show that I'm doing AI? A lot of times that just leads to confusion, and then you spend a lot of money on a project that was not well scoped and it was not well understood, and then eventually to abandonment. I heard a statistic about a week and a half ago. Prior to that, I think they were saying about 80% of AI projects failed, and then the statistic actually went up above the 90% mark. So just know that if you have not started on your AI projects yet, you're not as far behind as what you would hear out on the internet. You're probably in a good place as long as you get focused on the things that you need to focus on before you start kicking off the AI projects. So most AI initiatives stall not just because of cost. There's definitely some that the costs spiral out of control, but it's usually due to a lack of clarity. So focus on the outcomes and then start looking at the metrics that you can collect to measure your progress towards that outcome. So the question that actually matters is what parts of our business are ready for AI? And you need to look at your people. Which people are ready? Which ones do you want to involve? Which ones are going to be resistant? And then look at what the data is. Is it unstructured data? Is it structured? Do you have well-tagged data that's easy to consume? You can use AI in both cases. Just the unstructured data is going to be a little bit more costly because it takes a different type of processing. And you may want to start looking at how to structure your data to feed into your AI projects for the longer term. And then really understand the workflows that you want to automate, why you want to automate those, where AI fits into the workflow. And again, if you have not automated yet, you're probably not ready for AI, but if you've automated a lot and now there's certain things you can't automate because you don't have the intelligence layer in place, that's where the AI would fit into your project. And finally, understanding the risk. So again, reputational risk. It could be something that exposes customer data. It could be something where you let AI create pictures and they're inappropriate for your industry. There's a lot of risks that could materialize. And so make sure that you understand as you implement AI how the outcomes of that could potentially lead to exposures and risk. Technical readiness does not equal AI readiness. So evaluating your business for AI readiness is really about the workflows. First and foremost, you really need to understand the workflows and then the data that feeds those workflows, the people that still need to be in the loop, who has the deciding power, who has the knowledge, and are those people going to be engaged and willing to accept the responsibilities? And then always keep in mind the risk again. So even if you have the technical readiness where you have all of the systems and the tools in place, but you don't coach your people, you don't bring them on board, or you don't have ownership over the risks, then you are still not ready for AI. So, what's working right now? What we see in the market right now is that if you start small, you want to find something that's not complex. It's fairly small workflow. It's repeatable. You can find a high value, repetitive work stream that would be ideal for your first AI project. It's low risk. You're probably something internal. It could even be something with your own employees, just making their lives a little bit easier. Start with that. Make sure that you implement that. Make sure your people are involved. Learn from that one, and then you can start to expand out. Make sure you assess your workflow before you automate. If you just start automating and you haven't already thought through the inputs and the outputs, you're likely to run into areas where you're not going to be able to move forward. So take the time, write it down, put it on paper, draw it on a whiteboard, get a few people involved, and make sure that you're assessing the workflows. I would say document 5 to 10, and then out of those, pick 1 to 3 to actually start with, and then move on from there. So again, keep this really contained, keep it manageable, keep it where you have a high probability of success, and you'll keep your costs low, you'll grow your workforce faster, and you'll learn very rapidly using this method. And then keep humans in the loop. Know that there are some things that artificial intelligence is not going to be able to do for you. Accept that right up front. And wherever those human in the loop decision points are, then you can work towards getting confidence that you can remove the humans later. But don't be in too big of a rush to get rid of the humans making the final decision and owning the responsibility. If you allow them to have ownership of it, then they will be the ones who tell you when it's okay to let AI move forward with it, because they're still responsible. And if they're confident, you can have pretty high confidence that they've evaluated the risks and that they're willing to sign off on it. So don't move fast. A lot of people right now are just trying to sprint, and they're not ready to move. Take the time to move intentionally. So not only take the time to identify those use cases, but make sure you understand what your success criteria looks like. What is it that you really want the outcome to be? Is it going to be more accuracy? Is it going to be more consistency? Is it going to be faster delivery? Is it going to be less time from a particular resource? Make sure that you have that documented and then track towards that goal. And that way, as you're piloting, you'll be able to know whether or not you're actually gaining momentum, or if you need to pull that use case out and reevaluate. So looking for those low risk, repeatable use cases that we talked about before, where they're things that happen every day. They're kind of a daily grind, and they're not a high value initiative. Then those would be really good ones to start with. They get buy-in from the employees because it takes that burden off of them. They see the value of AI right away, and then they start to think strategically about how to apply that in other places. And then I always say, invite your best employees to innovate, and then they can advocate for your AI project. So your best employee may not be your brightest. It may not be the one with the most tenure, but it would be the person who is willing to step in. They're willing to learn. They're willing to take the time to get creative and think outside of the box. Get them involved. Ask your employees for suggestions. Involve them at every step that you can involve them, because they are your eyes and your ears, and you hired them for a reason, right? So use their talent and their creativity to benefit your business. And we always want to crawl before we walk, and we want to walk before we run. That would go for any IT project, and AI is no different. There's a lot of fear right now that we're falling behind, and what we're seeing in the marketplace is most of that fear is unfounded, and people are actually spending a lot of money on failed projects. And so you can actually learn from what they've failed at, and you'll be able to succeed where someone else has already taken the lesson for you. So, the truth is, many leaders don't need AI tools yet. They need clarity on where AI fits into their business and the knowledge to know where it doesn't. I think we've covered all of this in pretty deep detail. If you have any questions, leave those in the chat, and I will answer those questions to the best of my ability. And if there's a particular AI case you have for your business that you're struggling with, I'd be happy to discuss that as well. So thank you for listening to this, and I hope you found it valuable.